Mini episode 957 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.com.
The FDH Lounge. You'll want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to FDH Lounge mini episode number 957. We have a very special Super Bowl preview coming up. A couple guys who have played football at the highest of levels joining Rick Morris, here on the program. A guest that we've had on a couple of times previously. I've always enjoyed talking to him, and I am certainly very flattered that the feeling is mutual. Chidi Ahanotu, great player for predominantly in his career the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, of course, the greatest left defensive end, I believe, in the history of the Tampa Bay Bucs, as was voted on, and one of the great players in the history of the franchise, and somebody who really made quite a dent during his career in the NFL, since has done so as an entrepreneur, and I understand a new book coming out, Urban Legend, so and I certainly look forward to talking about that with you in the time ahead as well. Chidi, always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for coming on for this segment.
It's a pleasure to be on with you, Rick. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chidi, and kind of a small world here, because I noticed on Twitter you gave a shout out to a couple of different media people here talking about some of the proceeds of the book, or all proceeds, I should say. Let me correct myself, going to charity here. And you asked for recommendations from a couple of media people. One of them is Jay Crawford, formerly of ESPN, who is presently in residence at Bowling Green State University, a Bowling Green alum. And we are very privileged to have another Bowling Green alum on with us, much like my mother. I am this proud son of a Falcon, so it's a soft spot in my heart. And as a matter of fact, my family has since set up the Carol Morris Memorial Scholarship Fund at Bowling Green State University for students who are training to be in special education, as my mother was. Always happy to have a Falcon on the show, much less a very accomplished fella who played for a long time in the NFL, made a great mark with the 1970s Oakland Raiders predominantly, a Super Bowl champion in Super Bowl 11, four-time Pro Bowl player, AFC Defensive Rookie of the Year in 1971. I could only be speaking of Phil Villapiano. Phil, it's a pleasure to have you in the FDH Lounge for the first time. How are you today, sir?
I'm good, Rick. Thank you. Thank you for having me on. And, hey, your mother's a fighting Falcon. I love your mother. That's beautiful.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I know she's listening to this from the clouds on high here, and very happy that we are having on a Falcon. And as a matter of fact, I want to start with you on the first question here because of your background and you having come through the league as you did. The gold standard, shall we say, for teams that really like to enjoy themselves, we always think of that as the 1970s Oakland Raiders teams. That's, I think, what comes first and foremost to mind is lived hard, played hard, that legendary ethos of that team. So you're the guy I want to start to ask this question with in terms of the Super Bowl this year being in the Twin Cities. Now, I'm wondering if we jabbed some truth serum into some of the players, they're thinking to themselves, gee whiz, did I grab the short straw here, the Twin Cities, as opposed to New Orleans or another place like that? You know, I tend to think of that song, that great song that Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly had from Step Brothers, Boats and Hoes. That's kind of the imagery that a lot of us get of Super Bowl week. They're in the Twin Cities.
Yeah.
Honest answer, Phil. How much of a letdown do you think it would be for players to be going there as opposed to a warm weather fun city in February?
You know, it's really nutty. We played in the Rose Bowl. It doesn't get much better than that. Funny thing, we played against the Vikings, so the Vikings came to the Rose Bowl to play the Rays. But you know, that week goes by so fast. You don't even think about where you're at. I mean, as far as we had a little bit of fun, but we knew we win that game. We're going to have a whole lot of fun we stayed in Oakland, and we was business as usual. And then I think it was like the Sunday before or something, we just flew down there, and I don't remember. We stayed in a beautiful hotel, beautiful brand new Marriott, but I don't remember anybody abusing it. It was pretty much of a business trip, and we played that way. Now I think the funniest one I remember was in the next Super Bowl down in New Orleans. I was playing with the Bills at the time, so I wasn't on that team. But when John Matusak was spotted at 5 o'clock in the morning somewhere, and they asked Tom Flores, about what's your defensive end doing out at 5 o'clock in the morning, and Tom says, "Oh, he was just trying to get the guys to come home." So he made a joke about it. And that's kind of the way the Raiders were, and that's what you would think. But I really remember our team was, man, we had just been to 4 AFC championship games in a row and lost them all. We weren't about to lose a Super Bowl. We were pretty focused.
Absolutely, and you guys did get the job done there. And Chidi, I want to get your thoughts on this. You and I pretty close in age. You being somebody from your perspective a little bit closer to the perspective of today's generation in the NFL. So, yeah, you must have a lot of friends out there that are still currently playing and around the league. So, what's your sense of, again, if we were to jab these players with truth serum here, are there any of them you think that would be saying, the Twin Cities, really? This is the luck of the draw that I get?
Well, those two teams that are playing in the Super Bowl, I can promise you probably get 0 of those guys to say that. The Patriots are business as usual, and they don't care if they're playing in Alaska or the North Pole. You put them anywhere, they'd be happy to play in that game. And then as far as Philadelphia, I don't think they won. They haven't won a Super Bowl. Have they won ever? They haven't won since
Nope.
Since the 70s.
Yeah, they're like my Cleveland Browns. You got to go back before there was Super Bowls to find their NFL championships. So yeah,
You're right. But so they're happy to I think it's a business trip for them as well, for the Philadelphia Eagles. So I don't think they care too much. For the Super Bowl I played in, we were in New Orleans. I was with the Rams. We were in Party City, and you couldn't, we weren't running around in the streets. We were on a business trip, much like Phil was saying. So I don't think you get any of the guys to say that they wish they were in a, sunny place like L.A. or Florida or Arizona. And quietly, the secret of it, really, actually, Minneapolis is one of the best cities to go have fun in. That was the trip that all the wives and the girlfriends and best friends would take along with us when I played in Tampa, for those 10 years. That was the trip everyone got excited to go to, actually. So it's it's not on everybody's map or radar, but Minneapolis is a very fun town.
Wow. Well, you guys both just completely disabused me of that notion, and you in particular there, Chidi. Great little nugget as far as Minneapolis actually, and Minneapolis St. Paul, I guess, collectively. Being actually a fun area, maybe a little bit under the radar in terms of what we think. I generally like to go back and forth and rotate on these questions, but for the next one, I'm going to start with Phil again because I want to go back to Super Bowl 11. I kind of want to take this chronologically here in terms of looking at the Super Bowls, and that's one of those ones, Phil, where you look at it and it feels like maybe the one of the last ones, if we're looking at sort of a modern era dividing line before and after, that one feels like it kind of fits on there pretty good on that dividing line to me. January 9th, it ended up being the last of the afternoon games, and it's funny because I was watching a YouTube clip of the previous year's Super Bowl, and the announcers were talking about, stay tuned for final round coverage of the Phoenix Open after the Super Bowl, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, what a real difference that is. But that game being there in the bright sunlight of the Rose Bowl all afternoon as opposed to the spectacle that we get today. So from the perspective of somebody who came up, played in that game, and then what you've watched subsequently, your thoughts on that Super Bowl and the ones that have followed as far as the evolution into the modern spectacle we see today?
You're calling it a spectacle. spectacle, and you're absolutely right. I don't think that anybody can throw a party better than the NFL, and you know how much money they got, and they pour it in, and they make it a spectacle. I mean, all the way from all the commercials. I love the commercials, and then the halftime shows are fantastic, and then the football game maybe not so fantastic all the time. Even though recently there've been some really, really good games. So yeah, it's a spectacle. I enjoy it. You know, and it's just like the game has changed so much since I played. You know, the rules and the attitude of the players and the money and all that stuff. It's changed so much, but I'm right in there with them. God bless them. They're making a lot of money. They put on a good show, and NFL puts on a great show too. So Super Bowl to me is, I mean, it's a holiday. I like to watch it. I go to Reno every year. A big friend of mine, Conrad Dover, and I, we go host a show at the Silver Legacy Hotel in Reno, and you know, we've been doing it like 25 years. We just go out there and enjoy every minute of it. I'm glad the NFL has made a spectacle of it. I enjoy it.
Oh, absolutely. No question about that. And Chidi, in terms of the Super Bowl that you referenced, and again, you and I being more or less about the same age here, by the time you played, it was more of the modern spectacle that it is today. So your thoughts on it, that, again, when we were younger, you know, you had basically the Super Bowl that Phil was in, the last of the afternoon Super Bowls in 1977, and then the progression throughout the 1980s. And when I watch the clips of them, I'm struck that your average Browns-Jets game today has more sophisticated graphics than any of the Super Bowls in the 80s when you're watching those ones. It seems like the 90s kind of were a little bit of a turning point here as far as becoming the modern spectacle. Michael Jackson played the halftime show, I think, in 1993, and things kind of changed from there. So your thoughts on it, Chidi, following it along in your life as a football fan to playing in the game to what you see today?
Well, first I want to say to Phil, Phil, I grew up watching you guys play. I'm from Oakland. So,
are you? I didn't know that. That's great.
Yeah. So it's an honor to be talking with you. And I remember vividly standing in front of my TV in my room on the old wooden dresser, watching you guys on my black and white TV.
Yeah, that's showing me. You're showing me my age, but you're right. Hey, so let me ask you a question. Now, this will be really funny if you remember this. Otis Sistrunk, okay? You got to remember Otis. And there was, remember AC Transit, which was the buses, and the AC Transit took the kids to school. So I got a phone call from the president of AC Transit and said, Phil, we got an idea, and we're going to run this by. And I said, what do you got? He says, I want you to grab a defensive end or a defensive lineman. We want to call it Project Linebacker, backing up the bus line, okay? And so a lineman and a backer. And we're going to go around and talk to all the grammar school kids and tell them to leave the drivers alone. Don't rip up the seats. Don't draw all over the place. So Otis and I did that for about 5 or 6 years. I would crack up if I came to one of you. Did you ever remember Otis and I coming to your grammar school?
Well, okay, so I went to school in Berkeley, so I was always between Berkeley and Oakland.
Okay, we didn't get up there. We did the Oakland schools, but pretty much it would have been. Oh my God, that would have been in the 70s.
Yeah.
No, a little bit. I don't know. Where were you in like 75, 76? How old were you?
So I was born in 1970, and we moved to the
6 years old.
San Francisco Bay Area when I was 2 years old. So 72. And I started watching football. My father's from Nigeria. He didn't know anything about football. I just started watching it and liked it. And of course, hometown team being the Oakland Raiders, and the 49ers. But we were big Raiders fans. We were right there next to Oakland. So we really appreciate everything you guys did for the game.
I really enjoyed hearing that, and as a matter of fact, just the thought of any Oakland Raiders going out there preaching any kind of law and order like that in the classrooms, that's so counterintuitive. I find that hilarious. That's funny that they had you guys out there doing that. Nothing like having guys from the biggest outlaw team of the era out there. So sounds like you were having fun with it, and as a matter of fact.
But see, Rick, back then the Raiders weren't the Raider Nation, the crazed Raider Nation that it is now. Like you were talking about comparing today versus then, and correct me if I'm wrong, Phil, but the Raider Nation wasn't so vicious as they are today as they were back in the 70s.
Yeah. No, but I used to think Raider fans were like gentlemen. But now, my God, you look at that black hole, you wonder what's going on over there. You know, it's nutty. But I enjoy when I go back there, and it's just nuts. So, you know, it's a spectacle, as we said before. You know, it's crazy. The fans they just go wild. So, God bless them, and hopefully we can get a winning team one of these years. You know, last year we almost had something going, but we got to give something to cheer about before we go to Vegas.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, and I'll tell you what, too, I would be remiss if I didn't mention this when we're talking about the Raiders stuff from back in the day. Some of the research that I came across here, something called the American Sports Network that was doing a countdown here, the number 24 moment in Super Bowl history. Phil Villapiano's tackle turned Super Bowl 11 in Raiders' favor. So your big tackle in that game, and you were actually quoted fairly extensively in this article here, Phil. So nice that that's out there so that people can get a little better perspective on how important that was.
Well, you know, it was really, really crazy because, you know, you're scared to death when you know, I don't care how many games you played. This was my 6th year. I was a seasoned guy, but man, I didn't want to go on the field, and I was nervous. And Ray Guy, you know, our offense goes out there, and the Vikings held us, and Ray Guy has to punt from about the 20-yard line, and the guy comes off the end and slaps the punt down. Ray had never had a punt blocked in high school, college, or pros. It was nuts. Luckily, he was a great athlete. He spun around, makes the tackle on the 2-yard line, and here comes the defense. So now we got to start our Super Bowl on the 2-yard line, and they had this big thing we called the jumbo, where they took out their wide receivers and they brought in a couple more offensive tackles. And we studied them during the week, and it was like, I said, Coach, this is all they got? They only had a run-off tackle, run-off guards. So we kind of wanted them to go into jumbo because they only did 2 plays. So anyway, Monty Johnson's calling the signals in the huddle, and I stuck my head in there. I said, "Matzo ball, if they got jumbo coming in, jumbo's coming in. We got him where we want him. We got him where we want him." And I don't think too much about it. I'm thinking we got him where we want him because we could stop him. We had already stopped them on first down, second down. So now they're coming in with this thing, and that we brought in 2 more linebackers because they took out the wide receivers. And I'm up over Ryan Yeary. He was an offensive tackle, and I figured I could beat him at what we call the pinch, and I did. And I shot right in front of him, and I was right in the backfield. I saw Darkington giving the ball to McClanahan, and I stuck my face in there. CD, you know what that feels like? I stuck it in there. I knew he fumbled, and I held his arms to his body so he couldn't recover it. We recovered it, and we go down 97 yards, and we score. And I thought that was the end of it. And Madden comes over to me just before, you know, now we're going to kick off to them. And he comes over and he goes, "Hey, Phil, you all right?" I said, "Yeah, Coach, what's up?" He goes, "Tatum's telling me you're screaming in the huddle. We got him where we want him on the 2-yard line." And I said, "Coach, we did." And anyway, he loved it. And I never thought about it, but it turned out to be a really big play. And, yeah, but, I mean, if they go in, who knows? But we turned it around and went in and scored, and yeah, that was a good one.
Wow.
That was a good one, Rick.
Well, that's amazing. That's amazing. I mean, those are the moments that last forever, and we're a couple of days away now from getting to see what plays last forever that happen this Sunday. So I'll start this round with you here, Chidi. Is thoughts on the game for this week. In our previous mini episode, I had done a segment where I was kind of breaking down the game just from my own perspective. 3 keys to the game that I thought were pretty important, and I want to get both of your thoughts on it. I'll start with you, Chidi, in terms of, I think, number one, what we saw in the NFC playoffs here, Foles was not aggressive in the first game, didn't look so great, was aggressive against Minnesota. I think he's got to stay aggressive, but still not make mistakes. And if that sounds hard to do against New England in the Super Bowl, maybe that's why they're the underdogs. But I think Foles has to thread that needle of being aggressive but not turning the ball over. I think the Eagles have to be able to establish time of possession in their favor. They've been a good time of possession team. They got the power backs. I think they got to be able to thump New England enough to be able to maintain the time of possession in their favor, and I think they've got to be able to get a good pass rush going with just the front 4 there. Teams that have done that against Brady in the playoffs historically have had a lot of success. And if you can do the 4-man rush, make it effective, that's something that plays to the Eagles' strengths. So your thoughts on that, Chidi? Agree or disagree with me on those being big keys for the game?
No, I agree wholeheartedly, Rick. That's definitely the game plan to beat the Patriots. I think they can definitely execute that game plan. This Patriots team isn't the greatest of Patriots teams that we've seen in the past. They have a lot of holes and weaknesses. So if they can do what they did against Minnesota, against the Giants during the season, I think they have a really good chance to win this game. And if you can include a couple of big plays on that defense, like they've been doing, crucial turnovers, interceptions or fumbles, that's just more of a dagger against New England. So I think it's definitely doable, and it'll be one of the biggest upsets ever.
Very well said, Chidi. I agree with you. I think if they go out there, if they can execute their game plan, make it happen, we've already seen if they can do that, they can beat anybody. That's how good they are, and obviously Foles being in there, that's the big question. So I'll turn to you on this, Phil. In terms of Foles being aggressive but not turning the ball over, in terms of establishing time of possession in Philly's favor with the power running game, in terms of Philly getting the 4-man pass rush effectively working against Brady, do you agree that those are among the biggest keys to the game on Sunday?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. Very good there, Rick, because if you do all that, they're going to win this game. They played such a perfect game against Minnesota. I was so impressed with their pass rush, and this is kind of reminding me a little bit of the Giants versus the Patriots Super Bowl games, where the Giants' defensive line totally took over the game. And Chidi said something that is very, very important. He said this is not the best Patriot team that we've seen. So I think Philadelphia could pull this off. And not that I'm a big man, but I am going to Reno, and I'm thinking I think I'll take those points and bet the Eagles.
Well, yeah, and it's funny, you talk about the Giants because we go back to the 2 Super Bowls where the Giants beat New England, and they've been the one team that's sort of been the kryptonite to them in the Super Bowl. But when I think Giants in the Super Bowl, I'm going back a little bit further because Philly this year with Nick Foles in there, I think the obvious precedent is they're looking for him to be Jeff Hostetler 2K18 because we've only really seen this done, I think, once before where a team's been able to continue a run like this by plugging a guy in and having a good enough defense and surrounding elements there. And again, Philly is so strong on both sides of the ball. They've survived a lot. They've had more in the way of, I think, significant injury losses than New England, even with Dante Hightower going down, even with the loss of Julian Edelman. Philly losing Jason Peters is monumental because of how much it helps them in the trenches. Darren Sproles, who it seems like has been their scat back since like 1855. They've lost some key pieces along the way here. But as you look at it, Phil, I'll start with you in this round here. In terms of things that we haven't talked about yet when you're looking at these teams here, what do you think some of the keys to the game are going to be in terms of Philly either pulling the upset or New England withstanding them and winning a second Super Bowl in a row?
Well, I think it's all going to be on Philadelphia's defensive line. I see them. They play rough. I like the way they play. I think they're like long coming off the edge.
Very interesting and good point about down there in the trenches, because Philly is just about the toughest team in the league to run on right now, which should give you a lot of problems if you're New England, except for the fact that their short passing game and the screen passes, they've always used that as an extension of the run game. So that may be a non-factor just on the surface of it as far as Philly's great against the run, so New England's going to struggle. Nah, they've always found ways around that. And I have to say, Chidi, those words had to be music to your ears as far as the defensive lineman for Philly being a big part of the keys of the game here, and the role that the defensive linemen are going to play. That had to be pretty sweet for you to hear as a great defensive lineman in your own right. So when you look at this, what are some of the additional keys to the game that we haven't yet identified in your estimation?
Well, no one's talking about special teams.
Ooh.
And that was the dagger in Jacksonville's championship game when they muffed that punt to the 50. I said, that's it. They're not going to win this game. So the Philadelphia is going to have a solid special teams. See, the Patriots over the years, they take advantage of every little nook and cranny, and at the end of the game, it ends up being one big advantage. And the special teams is one of those advantages that the Patriots like to take advantage of, and they just kind of creep up on you. It's like death by inches. And at the end of the game, you're looking around like, what the hell happened? But special teams.
Very good point.
Yeah, definitely. The special teams will be very integral in Philadelphia winning this game. If they can get big special teams play against the Patriots, that's going to be huge for the Eagles.
That's very true, because we don't tend to see that a lot from New England over a period of time. They do not generally surrender those type of things in big games. So, yeah, that's one more thing in Philly's favor, if they can be one of the rare teams to make it happen. In the end, I agree with what seems to be a consensus here on this being a fairly close game. I'm going to say Pat's the cover just because the line has come down a little bit. I'm going to say 24-19. I might be one of the rare people looking at the under in this game. But I'll say New England and the under as I look at it here. I'll start with you, Chidi. As far as how you have to guess how the game goes, who do you see coming out on top in the end?
Well, I'm gonna say the Patriots are gonna win. I don't want them to win.
Me neither.
But we talk about the Patriots as I think the strongest teams in their recent history to come to the Super Bowl. But the Philadelphia Eagles are definitely not one of the strongest opponents that the Eagles have had to face. So it's kind of give or take here, but I hope the Eagles pull it out. My family, they're from Allentown and Nazareth and Bethlehem, so they in Philadelphia. So I know they'd be happy if the Philadelphia Eagles would win and pull this out. But I think it's going to be the Patriots. Close to the score you said, Rick. I think it'll be a 24-21 game or 24. Maybe even less for Philly, like 14 game. But like I said, if the Philadelphia Eagles can pull out some crucial plays, you never know. They might eke it out.
Well, I agree with you on the general tone of how the game's going to end up, what style of game it's going to be, and I certainly agree with you on who I'm rooting for, which is not New England. Cleveland, Ohio is never going to be a place that cottons to rooting for any team from Boston. I'm your typical Clevelander in that regard. We want them to lose whenever possible. And I have some friends that are Philly fans, so I hope I'm wrong. And Phil, it sounds like you think I might be wrong, so I'd like to hear you make a persuasive case on why I can get a happy ending on Sunday night and have the Eagles win the Super Bowl.
Well, I just, and Chidi probably feels to me, I like that nastiness of the Eagle defense. I think they're nasty. I think they hit really hard. And I'm thinking John Madden would say defenses win championships. I'm going to go with that defense. And I also, I don't really like Philly. My son and I went to a Philadelphia
Interesting. Okay, so you're disagreeing with me both ways. Okay.
I like you get in that dome, and I think Brady's going to score, but I think Philly's going to score. And Chidi likes the special teams. I'll get the special teams to score too. So
Wow.
I think we're going to get it over.
Wow. Well, I think it'll be an interesting game. I think Chidi and I described one scenario that would be pretty interesting. You described a scenario that would be pretty interesting. So sounds like we're in for fun times on Sunday. And again, much like this conversation that we had here, pairing up two guys who've been on the biggest stage in the NFL and who really, really know how to talk football. Chidi, it's been a pleasure to have you on again, and I look forward to discussing your book with you when that comes out. I hope to get a chance to get into that in some detail with you. Thank you so much for being on again.
Hey, Rick, if I have time.
Yes.
I just wanted to say to Phil, we're speaking about my book that's coming out this season. It's called Urban Legends, The Untold Story of the Life of a Nobody. That's the title of the book. But I want to say to Phil, you mentioned you're good friends with Conrad Dobler. That's actually the first NFL book that I ever read as a kid, the one that he wrote.
Oh my God! They call me dirty.
Yeah.
They call me dirty. Well, I'm gonna tell you what. You would not want to play against him. Oh my God! You go up against a guy like Conrad Dobler. Look at your career and say, how much longer do I want to play? Because this guy could end your career on any given play because he just didn't care. He was as nasty could be.
Oh, my God.
They called him dirty.
Yes,
he was bad.
Yeah, he was. And Phil, if you don't mind, just please tell him that story for me. I mean, that would mean the world to me because he's actually one of the ones that inspired me to play. Yeah, he's one of the guys that inspired me to play defensive line after reading this book. I wanted to go up against him.
Beautiful. I'm going to tell him that.
That's awesome.
And poor Conrad just had back surgery. He can hardly stand up anymore. This kid, he's had like 9 knee replacements. He makes Jim Otto look good. That's how bad he is.
Well, I'm sad to hear that.
I'll let him know.
Yeah,
I'll tell him.
Please do that for me.
That's awesome. That's so awesome to hear that and to know that he was an influence on you, Chidi, and that Phil's going to get a chance to tell him that when he's hanging out with him this weekend. And just what an amazing pairing it was with you two guys being on tonight. And Phil, first-time guest here on the show. Please don't make it the last time. You were awesome. I look forward to talking to Pigskin with you in the future.
Okay, well, good luck to your Cleveland Browns. I hope they can draft the right quarterback this year.
Yeah, well, not holding my breath, but we'll see how that goes, and I think the odds are certainly far better that we're going to be in for an entertaining Super Bowl on Sunday, and we'll all be tuned in for it, Super Bowl 52. And thank you, everybody, for checking out FDH Lounge mini episode number 957.
As we bring the show to a close, we would like to extend our deepest gratitude to NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox, all Clear Channel affiliates, TNT, TBS, USA, UPN, Deadspin.com, YouTube.com, YTMND.com, MySpace.com, various blogs, Fox News, CNN, CNBC, MSNBC, IamBoard.com, Billboard.com, Google.com, ESPN, ESPN2, ESPN News, ESPN Classic, NBA TV, NFL Network, Sports Time Ohio, Athlon Magazine, Comedy Central, Cartoon Network, The Boomerang Channel, QVC, BET, The Spice Channel, Steno Notebooks, Manwich, Papermate Office Supplies, waitresses, strippers, bartenders, garbage men, janitors, microwave popcorn, the writers of The Office, Scrubs, Entourage, My Name is Earl, Oz, Metalocalypse and the Boondocks, Aquafina, and the periodic table of elements.